Dr. Zilxian adjusted his third ocular membrane as he gazed proudly around the gleaming medical bay of Unity 7, the most advanced medical facility in the Centaurian Alliance. The ionic sterilization field hummed softly, its pale blue glow reflecting off the quantum-enhanced regeneration pods that lined the walls. Truly, he thought, we have reached the pinnacle of medical science. His antennae twitched in mild irritation as the sound of whistling, actual, primitive whistling echoed through his pristine medical sanctuary. The source? A human engineer who had just sauntered into his medical bay, holding what appeared to be a bleeding hand wrapped in. Was that cloth? "Hey Doc," the human's voice was inappropriately cheerful for someone trailing red biological fluid across his immaculate floor. "Got a minute? Had a little disagreement with a plasma torch." Dr. Zilxian's secondary heart skipped a beat. "Engineer Rodriguez, I presume he'd heard about the station's new human addition. Please cease your bipedal locomotion immediately. You're contaminating the sterile environment with your—" He paused, mandibles clicking in distaste. "Bodily fluids." Maya Rodriguez, because of course that was her name, had the audacity to laugh. "Oh, this? It's just a small cut. Nothing some antiseptic and a bandage won't fix." Antiseptic? Bandage. Dr. Zilxian's translator must be malfunctioning. These seemed like words from a primitive medical text about the Dark Ages. "Engineer Rodriguez, we have quantum-enhanced regeneration pods that can repair cellular damage in minutes. Please allow me to demonstrate our superior—" "Nah, that's overkill," Maya interrupted, pulling a small white box from her pocket. "Got my trusty first aid kit right here. Just need a clean place to patch myself up." Dr. Zilxian watched in horror as she opened the box, revealing an assortment of primitive medical supplies. His forearms gesticulated wildly in protest. "You cannot be serious. That's practically Stone Age technology." "Look," Maya said, already cleaning her wound with what appeared to be a simple chemical solution. "I appreciate the offer, but human bodies are pretty good at handling this stuff on their own. Plus, your fancy pods make me sneeze." The doctor's scientific curiosity temporarily overcame his disgust. "Sneeze? You mean that explosive expulsion of air and mucus that humans do? Fascinating. But surely you understand that our medical technology is far superior to your body's primitive healing mechanisms." Maya shrugged, now wrapping a self-adhesive bandage around her hand with practiced ease. "Sure, your tech is impressive, but you'd be surprised what a little human biology can do. Want to make a bet on how long it takes to heal?" Dr. Zilxian's pride as the station's chief medical officer wouldn't allow him to ignore such a challenge. "Very well, Engineer Rodriguez. I will document your healing process, if only to demonstrate the folly of refusing proper medical treatment." "Great," Maya beamed, flexing her newly bandaged hand. "See you tomorrow, Doc. Try not to worry too much about me dying from my prehistoric medical care." As she walked out, still whistling, Dr. Zilxian made a mental note to prepare a detailed report on human stubbornness. Surely this would be invaluable data for future xenological studies. Little did he know, this was just the beginning of his education in human resilience. The peace of Dr. Zilxian's perfectly organized medical bay lasted exactly 26 hours, 13 minutes, and 42 seconds, not that he was counting. The explosion in engineering shook the entire station with enough force to make his antennae vibrate at an extremely undignified frequency. Medical emergency in engineering section Delta. The AI's calm voice contrasted sharply with the chaos of multiple emergency signals flooding his neural interface. Multiple casualties reported. Severity level critical. Finally, Dr. Zilxian's assistant, Dr. KTATX, buzzed excitedly. A chance to show the human our superior medical. Boom. Boom. A second explosion cut off the young doctor's enthusiastic chittering. The medical team rushed to engineering, their hover stretchers humming softly behind them. The scene that greeted them was, well, let's just say it triggered all three of Dr. Zilxian's stress response bladders. Two Centaurians lay unconscious, their typically iridescent exoskeletons dulled by plasma burns. An Arxian engineer, poor fellow, had 3 of his 7 appendages bent at mathematically impossible angles. And there, in the middle of it all, was Maya Rodriguez, pinned under a fallen conduit, still somehow conscious, and was she laughing? "Hey Doc," Maya called out, waving with her free arm as if she were greeting him at a social gathering rather than lying in a pool of her own blood. "Remember that bet about healing? Might need to extend the timeline a bit." Dr. Zilxian's professional demeanor nearly cracked. "Engineer Rodriguez, you have multiple lacerations, probable internal injuries, and based on my scans, 3 fractured ribs. This is hardly a moment for levity. Could be worse, Maya grunted as the medical team carefully lifted the conduit. At least the plasma cord didn't breach. That would have been really embarrassing. The Zilxian engineer chose that moment to regain consciousness, immediately launching into a series of mathematical calculations about the explosions and probability. The odds of survival were approximately 0.0024%, he muttered, all 4 eyes blinking asymmetrically in shock. Statistics are for nerds, Maya replied, attempting to sit up before Dr. KTA gently restrained her with 2 of his medical tentacles. No offense, MX7B. Dr. Zilxian quickly assessed the casualties. The Centaurians had second-degree plasma burns across 40% of their exoskeletons, nothing the regeneration pods couldn't handle in a few days. The Zilxians' twisted appendages would require precise quantum realignment, but again, well within their technological capabilities. But Maya, her injuries were far more severe than she was letting on. Humans, with their completely internal skeletal structure and distressingly liquid circulatory system, were notoriously difficult to treat. Most concerning was their tendency to enter something called shock, which seemed to be their body's way of dramatically overreacting to trauma. All patients to Medical Bay 1 immediately, Dr. Zilxian ordered. Prepare 4 quantum regeneration pods. Yeah, about that, Maya interrupted, wincing as she was lifted onto a hover stretcher. Remember how your pods make me sneeze? Pretty sure that's not great with broken ribs. Just patch me up the old-fashioned way. Dr. Zilxian's professional pride flared like an unstable plasma conduit. Engineer Rodriguez, you have multiple traumatic injuries. This is not the time for your species' characteristic stubbornness. Our medical technology can repair your injuries in a fraction of the time your primitive biology would require. Maya's response was to cough up a small amount of blood and grin. Want to bet? You're literally bleeding internally, Dr. KTHAHX interjected, his medical tentacles waving in distress. All my bleeding is internal, Maya replied cheerfully. That's where blood is supposed to be. Dr. Zilxian made a mental note to research whether head trauma could explain the human's clearly compromised decision-making abilities. Very well, he said, mandibles clicking in resignation. We will treat you according to your traditional methods, but I will be documenting everything from my research on the psychological effects of Deathworld evolution on medical judgment. Cool, Maya said, giving him a thumbs up, a human gesture he'd learned meant either approval or impending sarcasm. Just try not to faint when you see how fast humans heal. It tends to freak out the non-Deathworlders. The medical bay hummed with activity as Dr. Zilxian orchestrated what he considered a symphony of modern medicine and one frustratingly primitive sideshow. The 3 alien patients were quickly settled into their quantum regeneration pods, their vital signs displaying in holographic detail above each unit. The pod's soft blue glow pulsed in sync with their occupants' various circulatory systems, a testament to the harmony of advanced medical science. And then there was Maya Rodriguez, stubbornly insisting on being treated on what she called a regular old bed. I must protest again, Dr. Zilxian said, watching in horror as Dr. KTHAHX prepared actual physical needles for something the human called stitches. This is barbaric. We haven't used puncturing implements for medical purposes since the Great Plague of Centauri Prime. Relax, Doc, Maya said through gritted teeth as Dr. KTHH administered a local anesthetic, another primitive chemical solution she'd insisted on using. This is standard procedure for humans. Besides, I brought my own medical kit from Earth, complete with instructions even a non-human can follow. Dr. KTHU had been studying the printed medical manual with fascination, wiggled his medical tentacles excitedly. The methodology is surprisingly logical, despite its simplicity, although I must admit, the concept of physically binding tissue together while it heals is unsettling. In the background, the quantum pods worked their scientific magic. The Centaurians' burned exoskeletons were already showing signs of molecular regeneration, their damaged cells being systematically replaced with perfect copies. The Zilxians' twisted appendages were being quantum realigned, each atom carefully repositioned according to their species' optimal configuration. Meanwhile, Dr. KTH was literally sewing Maya's largest wound closed like some kind of primitive textile project. Fascinating, muttered Dr. Zilxian, recording everything for his research. The human isn't even properly sedated, merely numbed in specific areas. And yet she appears to be, making jokes. What else am I supposed to do? Maya chuckled, then immediately regretted it as her broken ribs protested. Ow. Okay, no laughing. But seriously, this isn't even my worst Tuesday. You should have seen me after the incident with the antimatter containment field back on Mars. The medical staff paused their work. All eyes, optical sensors, sensory organs turned toward Maya. You survived an antimatter containment breach. Dr. KTHE's tentacles froze mid-stitch. Well, it was more of a partial breach, Maya shrugged, then winced again. Right, no shrugging either. But yeah, human medicine has plenty of experience patching us up after stupid accidents. We're kind of specialists in surviving things we shouldn't. Dr. Zilxian found himself comparing the medical readouts. The quantum pods were performing exactly as expected. The Centaurians' burns were 15% regenerated, right on schedule. The Arxians' appendages were precisely 22% realigned, matching all projected recovery timetables. But Maya's readings were impossible. Her tissue was already showing signs of accelerated healing around the freshly placed stitches. Her broken ribs had begun knitting themselves back together at a rate that made Dr. Zilxian check his diagnostic equipment 3 times. This defies all known medical science, he declared, waving his scanner over Maya again. Your cellular regeneration rate is nearly double what our calculations predicted for your species. Oh yeah, Maya nodded carefully this time. Humans tend to heal faster when we're actually up and moving around. Something about increased blood flow and stuff. I'm an engineer, not a doctor. Dr. KTATX, who had finished with the stitches and moved on to bandaging, bobbed all his sensory stalks in agreement. The manual mentions this. They call it promoting circulation and preventing stasis complications. It seems humans actually deteriorate if kept completely immobile during healing. Which is exactly why your fancy pods wouldn't work well for me, Maya added. Humans need to move, even when we're healing. We're weird like that. Dr. Zilxian watched in professional dismay as his assistant helped Maya sit up, something that should have been impossible given her injuries. The human grimaced but managed to swing her legs over the side of the bed. Now let's go over your care instructions, Dr. KTHEHE said, consulting the manual again. You'll need regular doses of these painkillers and antibiotics. The manual is quite insistent about completing the full course of antibiotics, though it doesn't explain why. Oh, that's to make sure we kill all the bacteria, Maya explained. Otherwise, the survivors might evolve resistance and... Evolve. Dr. Zilxian's antennae stood straight up in shock. You mean to tell me you have hostile microorganisms constantly attempting to evolve inside your body? Pretty much, yeah. That's why our immune system is so aggressive. We're basically in a constant evolutionary arms race with our own bacteria. The medical staff took an involuntary step back, their various appendages raised in defensive positions. Don't worry, Maya laughed, then clutched her ribs again. Oh, seriously though, human bacteria can't survive in your bodies. Different biochemistry and all that. Now, any chance I could get some crutches? I should try walking a bit before my muscles start getting stiff. Dr. Zilxian watched in equal parts horror and fascination as Dr. KTHEX helped fabricate a pair of simple mechanical supports for Maya to walk with. In their quantum pods, the other patients continued their carefully controlled, scientifically perfect recovery. Meanwhile, this human was preparing to literally walk off injuries that should have kept her immobile for weeks. I am beginning to suspect, Dr. Zilxian noted in his research log, that our understanding of advanced medical technology may require significant revision. 3 standard cycles had passed since the engineering incident, and Dr. Zilxian was seriously considering a career change. Perhaps xenobotany would be less challenging to his professional worldview. At least plants had the decency to follow the laws of biology as he understood them. The quantum regeneration pods continued their work exactly as the medical texts predicted. The Centaurians' burns were healing at a precise rate of 33.3% per cycle, their new exoskeleton cells forming in perfect crystalline patterns. The Arxians' appendages were realigning beautifully, each joint returning to its mathematically correct configuration. But Maya Rodriguez? She was currently recalibrating medical equipment with one hand while holding a cup of what she called coffee in the other. Engineer Rodriguez, Dr. Zilxian called out, his antennae twitching in agitation. Need I remind you that you suffered severe trauma merely 3 cycles ago? Our models suggest you should still be confined to bed rest for at least 7 more cycles. Models, schmodels, Maya replied, not even looking up from the diagnostic panel she was fixing. I told you humans heal faster when we're moving around. Besides, I was going crazy just lying there. Do you know your entertainment feeds don't have a single decent game? Not even solitaire. Dr. KTATX, who had become something of a human medical enthusiast, bobbed excitedly nearby. It's remarkable, Doctor. According to my observations, her ribs have already achieved 60% structural integrity restoration. The laceration sites are showing advanced tissue binding, and her internal bleeding has completely resolved. Impossible, Dr. Zilxian muttered, pulling out his medical scanner for what felt like the 1,000th time. The energy requirements alone for such rapid cellular regeneration should be. That's what the coffees for Maya interrupted, taking a long sip of the bitter brown liquid. Well, that and the 4 breakfast burritos I had this morning. Healing takes a lot of calories. The scanner's results only deepened Dr. Zilxian's professional crisis. Not only was Maya's recovery progressing at an alarming rate, but her body was actually generating new tissue faster than their quantum regeneration pods could manage. The only side effects appeared to be an increased appetite and what she called being a bit sore. A bit sore, Dr. Zilxian's professional composure finally cracked. You had 3 broken ribs. Your internal organs were traumatized. You lost enough blood to make me need a nap and an iron supplement, Maya suggested helpfully, now using her supposedly injured body to climb a maintenance ladder. Yeah, humans are pretty good at bouncing back. Though I gotta say, these stitches are starting to itch something fierce. Any chance we could take them out early? Dr. KTHEX consulted the human medical manual he now carried everywhere. The guide suggests removal after 7 to 10 cycles, but given your accelerated healing rate. The stitches stay in, Dr. Zilxian insisted, all 4 arms gesturing emphatically. At least allow us to maintain some semblance of medical protocol. Maya shrugged an action that should have been painful but apparently wasn't anymore. Sure, whatever you say, Doc. Oh hey, looks like MX7B is starting to wake up in their pod. Want me to help with the post-regeneration diagnostics? Dr. Zilxian watched as his human patient, who should still be bedridden, efficiently ran through the complex diagnostic sequence for the quantum pod. His medical sensors indicated her body was actively repairing tissue even as she worked, her enhanced cellular regeneration operating at peak efficiency without any technological assistance. Fascinating, he muttered, adding to his research notes. The human body appears to have evolved its own form of quantum regeneration, albeit through purely biological means. The implications for medical science are disturbing. Not disturbing, Dr. KTHEX corrected, his tentacles wiggling with excitement. Revolutionary. Just think of the possibilities if we could understand how their biology achieves such results without external technological support. Maya's voice called down from her perch atop the diagnostic equipment. If you guys are done being amazed by basic human healing, could someone hand me that plasma spanner? This calibration's going to take a while and I've got a date with the anti-grav basketball team later. Dr. Zilxian's antennae drooped in defeat. A date with the sports team? After experiencing multiple traumatic injuries. Yeah, Maya grinned. Nothing helps healing like a good workout, right? Late into the station's night cycle, Dr. Zilxian sat in his private office, surrounded by holographic displays of human medical data. His antennae hadn't stopped twitching for hours, and his third eye was developing a stress tic. The more he read, the more his understanding of medical science crumbled like a poorly maintained exoskeleton. This can't be correct, he muttered, manipulating a 3D model of human cellular structure. Their bodies deliberately cause inflammation as a healing response. And it works. Dr. KTHEX slithered into the office carrying even more data crystals. Doctor, you need to see this. I've been analyzing Engineer Rodriguez's blood samples. Their immune system isn't just active, it's aggressive, horrifying, a violation of at least 3 laws of biological warfare. Beautiful, Dr. KTHEX's tentacles wiggled with excitement. Their white blood cells don't just fight infection, they remember their enemies. They create specialized weapons for each type of invader. It's like having millions of tiny soldiers who run training simulations. Dr. Zilxian pulled up his comparison charts. The Centaurian's healing process was a marvel of evolutionary efficiency, systematic, predictable, and completely dependent on environmental stability. Archean regeneration relied on complex mathematical principles to rebuild damaged tissue according to their species-based genetic templates. But humans? Humans were chaos incarnate. Look at this, he pointed to a diagram of human hormone production. When injured, they release something called adrenaline that basically turns their entire body into a repair-focused panic machine. Their heart rate increases, blood flow redirects to vital areas, and they temporarily become stronger and more resistant to pain. Is that how Engineer Rodriguez lifted that fallen beam off Junior Medical Officer PX-10 yesterday? Precisely. Their bodies can temporarily override their normal physical limitations in emergencies. It's completely uncontrolled, highly dangerous, and somehow exactly what they need to survive. The displays shifted to show cellular regeneration rates across different species. The quantum pods could accelerate healing by precisely controlling every aspect of the process. Human healing, by contrast, was like watching a construction site staffed entirely by over-caffeinated workers with a deadline. Their cells don't just rebuild, Dr. KTHEX observed, manipulating the hologram. They overcompensate. Look at how the bone tissue around Engineer Rodriguez's healed fractures is actually stronger than before. Dr. Zilxian nodded, his professional pride now thoroughly replaced by scientific fascination, and their scars, their bodies literally create reinforced tissue to prevent future injuries in the same location. It's inefficient, inelegant, and remarkably effective. Don't forget their digestive system, Dr. KTHEX added, pulling up yet another horrifying diagram. They can convert almost anything organic into useful energy. Did you know Engineer Rodriguez ate something called a gas station sushi yesterday? Her body just dealt with it. Their entire evolution seems to be based on the principle of what doesn't kill us makes us stronger, Dr. Zilxian mused, adding to his research notes. While we developed technology to protect us from our environments, humans adapted to survive almost anything their death world could throw at them. He brought up the latest scans of Maya's healing injuries. The bone tissue was knitting itself together without any external assistance, guided by biological processes that had been refined over millions of years of surviving catastrophic injuries. Her soft tissue injuries were healing at rates that their most advanced regeneration pods struggled to match. We've been looking at this all wrong, Dr. Zilxian realized, his antennae straightening with sudden clarity. Our medical technology isn't more advanced than human biology, it's just more controlled. We achieved through science what they achieved through surviving countless near-extinction events. Should we tell the medical board, Dr. KTH asked, his tentacles curling nervously. Dr. Zilxian stared at the final comparison chart, which showed human healing rates consistently matching or exceeding their best technological solutions. We have to. This could revolutionize medical science across the galaxy. Though perhaps we should warn them to be sitting down first, preferably with some sort of safety restraints. Good idea, Dr. KTATX agreed. The last time I showed the recovery footage to the nursing staff, 3 of them molted prematurely from shock. The Unity 7 Medical Board's emergency session began with 3 premature moltings, 2 cases of stress-induced luminescence, and 1 Arxian physician calculating the statistical probability that they were all experiencing a mass hallucination. Dr. Zilxian's presentation wasn't even halfway done, as you can see from these readings. He continued, trying to ignore the way Chief Medical Officer Virilax's eye stalks were twisted into stress knots. Human cellular regeneration rates consistently match or exceed our quantum pod capabilities, using only biological processes that evolved naturally on their death world. Impossible. Dr. Flick's 7's bioluminescent patches were flashing into stress patterns. Next you'll tell us they can regrow lost appendages. Dr. KTHEX excitedly waved a data crystal. Actually, their liver can partially regenerate. And their skin? It's constantly replacing itself. They shed their entire outer layer every few weeks. The room erupted in a cacophony of chittering, buzzing, and mathematical equations being frantically calculated. One junior physician had to be escorted out after their probability glands became overloaded. Everyone, please. Dr. Zilxian's 4 arms waved for attention. I understand this is disturbing, but consider the implications. If we can understand how human biology achieves these results, we could revolutionize medical treatment across the galaxy. You want us to study these biological processes, Chief Medical Officer Virilax's voice quivered. These uncontrolled, chaotic, terrifyingly efficient processes. Exactly. Look at these tissue samples. Dr. Zilxian projected a hologram of Maya's healing ribs. Their bones don't just repair, they adapt. They become stronger at the break point. Their immune system doesn't just fight infections, it remembers them. Their bodies treat every injury as a learning experience. The medical board watched in horrified fascination as time-lapse imagery showed human tissue knitting itself back together, powered by nothing more than proper nutrition and what Maya had called walking it off. I propose, Dr. Zilxian continued, trying to maintain his professional composure, a complete review of our medical assumptions. Perhaps our focus on controlling every aspect of healing has caused us to overlook the benefits of more adaptive approaches. You mean letting bodies heal? Naturally, a Centaurian specialist's antennae curled in shock. Without quantum-precise molecular manipulation, without mathematical certainty. Sometimes Dr. KTHEH added helpfully, they even accelerate healing by deliberately stressing the injured tissue. They call it physical therapy. 3 more physicians had to be escorted out. I understand this challenges everything we believe about medical science, Dr. Zilxian concluded. But the evidence is undeniable. Human biology has achieved through evolution what we've spent centuries trying to perfect through technology. Perhaps it's time we learn from our Deathworlder colleagues. The room fell silent, except for the soft whirring of probability calculators and the gentle thud of another fainting physician hitting the floor. Finally, Chief Medical Officer Vrlax spoke. Dr. Zilxian, are you suggesting we should make our medical treatments more human? No, Dr. Zilxian replied, displaying one final slide showing Maya doing maintenance work while technically still recovering from major trauma. I'm suggesting we admit that sometimes the most advanced technology isn't technological at all. 2 weeks after the engineering incident, Maya stood in the medical bay, helping Dr. KTH demonstrate proper bandaging techniques to a group of fascinated alien medical students. Her formerly broken ribs had healed completely, and as she kept pointing out, were now stronger than ever, perfect for future accidents. Dr. Zilxian reviewed the final recovery statistics with a mixture of professional resignation and amazement. The Centaurians and Arxian had completed their quantum pod treatments exactly on schedule, their bodies restored to perfect baseline conditions. Maya, meanwhile, had not only recovered faster but had somehow managed to improve her overall physical condition through what she called making up for lost gym time. And remember, Maya explained to the wide-eyed medical students, sometimes the best medicine is just getting up and moving around. Within reason, of course, she added quickly, noting Dr. Zilxian's twitching antennae. Within reason, he echoed, still adjusting to the new hybrid treatment protocols that incorporated both advanced technology and what humans called listening to your body. The medical bay now featured a dedicated walk-it-off recovery zone, complete with exercise equipment and what Maya had insisted on calling the try it and see how it feels monitoring system. Hey Doc, Maya called out, grinning as she demonstrated proper crutch technique to a fascinated Arxian resident, ready for our afternoon jog. Dr. Zilxian's antennae drooped slightly. Engineer Rodriguez, I still maintain that recreational running is an unnecessary stress on the body. Great, she interrupted. Last one around the station's perimeter buys coffee. And remember, if you feel a cramp, that just means you're getting stronger. As Dr. Zilxian reluctantly followed his human patient turned fitness instructor, he updated his final research note conclusion: the most advanced medical technology in the galaxy might just be a human saying walk it off. And somehow being right.